Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Welcome to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage, the Vault Series. Today's clip is with a very close friend of mine, one of the best musicians I know. Not only is he an orchestra level trombonist, but he's also one of the very best country and rock and roll bass guitarists. One day in Nashville, the first time I ever saw this person in person was in the studio. And Conway Twitty was recording one of my songs. I looked out in the studio and I went, the bass player looks familiar. He looks like the bass player with Toto. And it was David Hungate. He also played on one of my Randy Travis cuts, Old 8x10. Which is no big deal at all for David because, you know, he played on Boss Gags. He played on so many great records in Los Angeles. In this clip, he talks about how he met the Porcaro brothers and Steve Lukather and so forth and put together one of my all-time favorite and most talented bands, Toto. Hope you enjoy it, David Hungate.
My first gig was on tenor saxophone with a country band in Troy, Missouri. And I played in little rock bands in high school. Went to college in 66, North Texas, and as a trombone player, and friends of mine knew I played a little guitar, so they drafted me to get an electric bass and do this summer gig they had on Cape Cod. We made $50 a week and played about 8 hours a day. But it was my first bass gig, and after that I was a bass player. You know, I found out it was a lot easier to make money, make a living, not starve, playing bass than trombone. I moved to Los Angeles in November of '71 to play on Sonny Cher's TV show. And about a month after I got, that was early '72, January, I believe, Dean Parks, dear friend of mine from school, invited me to play bass on a recording session at Leon Russell's house. It was a demo, some demos for a friend of ours from school, Sal Marquez, and Jim Keltner was going to be playing drums. And I wanted to play with Keltner. I'd never met him or gotten to play with him. I showed up, I was there late, and they were already running down the song. I put the phones on and plugged in my bass. The drums were in another room. And this drummer was just killing me. And Miss Keltner was, I'd never heard anything like it. And I went in to introduce myself after we got a take and opened the door. There's this little kid there, man. He was 16. I said, hi, I'm Dave Hungate. He said, I'm Jim Porcaro. And deep voice, you know, always. And we ended up recording all night. The sun was coming up when we were done, and that was probably the luckiest thing in my life was meeting Jeff then. And Sonny and Cher were thinking of changing drummers, and I lobbied hard, and we got Jeff on that gig, and then he got David Page on that gig. So that's one branch of the way Toto started. The other branch is Jeff and Steve and Lukather and Page having a band in high school. But that's how my involvement began. And we had started, David in particular and Jeff had started talking about how great it would be to have a band. And we kept along that line of thought and worked together with Seals and Crofts, and David and I worked with Neil Diamond, and we did a lot of studio work in L.A. in the early mid-'70s. In late '75, Boss Gags hired us to play on an album, and Silk Degrees, which ended up being huge, and that kind of got Toto started. We were approached actually by labels wanting us to be a group, you know, and so that was a good way a good way to be. It's unheard of these days, you know, but we were actually sought out.
All right, how did you go from Cape Cod to
Sonny
and Cher?
The gig on Cape Cod in the summer of '68 was just a summer thing, and I went back to Texas, and I was in a band with Dean Parks called Roy. It was kind of a avant-garde rock fusion country band. You know, we didn't know any songs. We just kind of improvised moods, and we had a few originals and could play Johnny Be Good, I think. And it was me and Dean and Tom Canning, Matt Benton. And this promoter in Dallas, Angus Wynn, who we'd worked for, had booked Sonny and Cher to do a couple college gigs. One was Oklahoma City and one was Amarillo or someplace. And anyway, they needed a band. They weren't carrying a band at that time. They were starting to make their comeback. So he hired us, and we showed up, and we could read and play well and play the styles, and they were pretty blown away. So they hired that band to be the road band. And when they got their TV show, Sonny graciously offered to get the band a chance to audition to be the band for the TV show, which was pretty unheard of in those days. They always used studio guys. So anyway, that was a real good, that was my in L.A., and that led to other TV work and records, and so that's how that's how that happened.
So from that, then you met Jeff,
I met Jeff a month or two after I moved to L.A.
and he was already doing sessions?
No, Jeff was in high school. I think he had played on one big band jazz type project. But he was just 16 years old, a high school kid. In fact, I think he had to drop out of school to go on the road. He was just starting out, and I had the Sonny and Cher thing. And David came on the Sonny and Cher gig about maybe 6 months to a year later. And he had had gotten established. I think Glenn Campbell had cut one of his tunes. It was a hit, and he was doing some arranging and was getting a name going. But at that point, none of us were studio musicians yet. It was kind of, we did a Seals and Crofts record. That was probably the first big record any of us played on, first big name act. And that, by the mid-'70s, we were all busy as session players for various people. Well, shortly after I met Jeff, I have to say the Porcaros were wonderful to me then. I just got into L.A. I remember I got a gig playing with some big band at a jazz club, and I didn't have a big enough bass amp, and Joe Porcaro brought his son's bass amp for me to play. I'd never heard his son play. I'd heard Jeff play. I probably went over to take the amp back, and Jeff was hanging out, and Mike was in their little studio in their garage. And anyway, he picked up a bass, and he started just playing this incredible a cappella, this great time and great technique. And he's 14 years old, man. And I said, oh my God, what have I got myself into? There's what other musicians do they have in his family? It's like incredible. And Mike was an influence of mine. He had a unique kind of way of playing with fingertips, just really edge. It could almost sound like you're playing really fast with a pick, but he was using like fingernails, and I copped onto that right away, and had this great time at 14 years old. And he's one of the true greats. He's one of the true greats. And to me, he did the heavy lifting with Toto too. He was out there all those years, and I feel like I should thank him for letting me keep his seat warm for the first 3 or 4 years of the band. But I love Mike and have the utmost respect for him, and I wish more than anything that he could be here tonight.
So this whole studio thing was just kind of, it just kind of like just happened. I mean, it's like,
That's the way it is for everybody, I think. I mean, you hope you're good enough, and you show up and do a few sessions and don't fall on your butt and do well, and you have a chance of getting called, and it's all word of mouth at that stage. And then if you're lucky and your name shows up on a hit record, which they didn't even put names on records until like a lot of cases until the late 70s. Motown, I don't think even did then, but yeah, that was one way of kind of getting known. But it's pretty much like it still is. Except there wasn't YouTube and that kind of thing. It was harder to. You had to get out and go to clubs and play and sit in and do anything that came your way, and just keep trying to get better.
so the record labels, they knew that you guys were playing with Boss
They knew,
Gags
and David had made overtures to do a solo album before that, about 74 probably, and for whatever reason that didn't pan out, and so they, and everybody knew Marty Page, and Joe Porcaro too, so record executives were interested just because of the relationship, so they would definitely listen, and David co-wrote several of the songs on Silk Degrees and was the arranger and did a lot of the production-oriented work, and people knew about that. So we had some credibility by that point.
And so they just came up and said, we want you guys to be a band?
Well, they knew we wanted to be a band. I wasn't really that involved with I don't believe we had managers at that point, even. But there was just a word around that we wanted to be a band, and they could look at Silk Degrees and see what we were capable of doing. So it was a good spot to be in at the time.
So y'all pretty much just went out and found a lead singer and...
Yeah, David, we found a lead singer, I believe Bobby Kimball was with a band called SS Fools, maybe. But David had heard him and thought he would be the guy for us, and that's how that came about.
And so you cut your first album and still doing studio work, or?
Yeah, oh yeah. We all kept doing studio work. There was one point where we had a band meeting and we had a hit record, so the line was out, and we decided, well, we can't just be playing for anybody, so we called, we're going to have to tell our accounts that we're not going to do any more studio work. So I called everybody I worked for and was real apologetic, and then I found out about 2 weeks later that everybody else was still doing studio work. So anyway, so I went back to doing studio work. We had a real short retirement, about 2 weeks. But anyway, it's one of the funny things that happened, of many.
What was it like when you guys did tour? And how long before you started touring?
We toured in, it was late 78, I believe. I know we played a month, I believe it was November of 78, at a resort hotel on Kauai. And coincidentally, the hotel was kind of really popular Japanese honeymooning couples, and Toto was the biggest toilet manufacturer in Japan, so this big sign, "Welcome Toto," welcome toilet. So we terrorized the island of Kauai for 2 or 3 weeks and kind of got our act together, and then we opened for Peter Frampton in Honolulu. That was one of our first big gigs, and that went really well. And we started touring in earnest early that next year. touring in the late 70s was vastly different than touring today. You know, and our only previous touring experience had been with Sonny and Cher, and that was flying on Hugh Hefner's jet with bunnies for stewardesses, and so it was like the height of luxury. So to go from that to riding a bus, a motorhome in some instances, was a little bit of a letdown, but it was our thing, so that was cool. Toto was always kind of a boutique band, you know, especially in the States. We got panned by Bob Hilburn and other rock critics. Rolling Stone hated us, and because we were too clean, you know, we played too well. We were studio musicians, you know, which is what they didn't mention is that most of the pop acts, the rock acts they like, we were playing on half their records, you know. So it was a screwy thing. That didn't seem to be a negative in Europe and Japan, you know. I mean, Toto's always been huge there in Europe and Japan. But the rock press really hammered us. So what are you going to do? And it was, you know, this among the elite rock critics, we were like persona non grata, you know. We were not thought highly of because that's a whole other area of discussion, you know, the injustice, I guess, or incompetence in equal measure of rock critics in that day and age, and it's probably worse now. I think there are less qualified, knowledgeable people writing about music now. But, I mean, they loved, you know, it was the kiss of death to be commercially successful, pretty much. They loved Patti Smith and, you know, the punk bands and the Clash and stuff like that, which, you know, it has its place, but, you know, it's really apples and oranges because they're coming from a poetry and theatrical place, and we were coming from a musical place, you know. It's but that was the criteria they used and still do, probably.
That's interesting. I just never paid attention myself to.
Well, that's why Toto didn't end up like the Eagles, or you know, not that the Eagles were that. I don't know what the critics thought of the Eagles early on. They probably loved them, but we just never broke that barrier of you know, being able to fill stadiums every night. I don't think. But McDonald's sells a lot of hamburgers, you know. So if you want to, you know, if that's what you want, you know, the lowest common denominator, which was not what we were trying to do, we still had to face our friends, you know, our good musician friends, and not be embarrassed. So we, yeah, and it was all we knew how to do, you know. At one point, Bob Hilburn had just given us a terrible review in the L.A. Times, and we decided we'd make a punk record just to, you know, to send to him or whatever. So we ended up playing some eighth note riff for like 10 minutes, and Jeff read an article out of Mix magazine. That was the vocal, and, you know, and enhanced it, you know, and Luke contributed some lyrics too. But, you know, it was a joke to us, you know. It was frustrating because, you know, see people without the kind of talent we had. They had a talent in a different area, but without the musical ability of that band, getting all the great reviews, you know, it went with the territory, you know.
So, and for you, when did you make the decision to leave the band?
I bought a house in Nashville in September of '80, and my older son was about a little over a year old, and I had always had my eye on Nashville. I did a record here with a band from Fort Worth in 1971, early 71. And it's kind of near where I grew up in Missouri. Yeah, so it always seemed like it'd be a neat place to live. And, you know, I grew up on a farm practically when I was a kid and loved that, the space and all that kind of stuff. So I guess the ultimate decision was, and my younger son was a month old, and Toto had a 9-month tour scheduled, and I had just begun breaking into Nashville, and I just didn't think I could do it. Just didn't think I could do it. Not to be a hero or anything. I was, you know, there were. That was really the basis of of leaving. So anyway.
Any regrets ever?
Of course.
I mean,
Yeah.
for leaving the band?
Of course, yeah. I mean, I would have loved to have been out touring with Toto 4, you know. But the same token, I would have hated being away from home, you know. So it was just one of those kind of decisions that are, you know, it's hard to make, and you never know whether it's right or wrong. You know, it's right for reasons and it's wrong for reasons, you know, and they're different. So at this point, I don't have any regrets. You know, I guess I'm, you know, I do. I missed out on getting to play with Jeff, you know, and the rest of those brilliant guys. But you know, it's things are good. Nashville has been a great place. I've made a lot of friends here and gotten to do a lot of things. So, you know, I guess it was the right thing to do.
Flipped me out when I was went over to Conway Twitty session, and Conway was he did 2 or 3 of my songs.
Yeah.
And you're on the session, and I'm like, hey, that's David. I mean, isn't he with Toto?
Yeah.
And that was weird to have.
Yeah.
You know, he played on the Conway Twitty record. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
right.
I did 7 records with Conway. He was, I loved him.
He was the reason I'm sitting here. You know.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I was, and I appreciate those guys like him when I first got here, because all the people in Nashville knew was this rock and roller from L.A. in a pop band is moving to Nashville and wants to do studio work, you know. So they didn't know what to expect, you know. And I met Conway and we hit it off, and I met Chet around the same time, and we hit it off. And yeah, that's a whole other subject, you know.
Well, can we talk about that for a minute?
Sure.
So,
I ended up producing 3 records with Chet. We co-produced 3 of his guitar albums. But I did a session that David Briggs booked me on. I don't remember if Chet was the artist or not. It might have been Eddie Arnold or somebody like that. But Chet was there, and then I did played on a Chet album. It was been early, after I got here, 82, something like that. And anyway, after Toto did well, and Chet had changed record labels, he'd gone to CBS, and Toto was on CBS. So I get this call from Chet out of the blue, and will you like you to co-produce my next album? And my only production experience was with Toto, and that was minimal. You know, I produced my bass parts. I mean, that's about it, and had a few suggestions here and there. But as far as the nuts and bolts of actually producing a record, finding material and all that, I didn't know anything. So, and I told Chet that, and he said, "Oh, you'll be fine." You know. So we did this record, Stay Tuned, and the premise was with Chet with guest guitar players. We had Mark Knopfler and Lukather and Dean Parks and Larry Carlton and George Benson and Earl Klugh. I'm probably leaving out somebody. The sticker on the cover also has a guitarist named Millard Grebe, and that's funny because Chet asked me to play a harmony part on one of his things. I'd worked out this Soli line, and I wasn't going to put my name on it, you know, as a guitar player, you know, playing with Chet Atkins, you know, people would say, oh, the gall of that guy, you know. So I made up this guy, Millard Grebe. And when they put the sticker in CBS, they had Larry Carlton, Steve Lukather, Dean Parks, Millard Grebe. So Millard's, that was the beginning and ending of Millard's career. But Chet was, you know, anybody who's known him or really knows anything about him, there's no way I could add to it. He was one of the finest human beings, one of the finest musicians in the same package, you know, which you very seldom find. Example, this says it for Chet. In his little studio in his basement, you'd walk in the control room. The first thing you saw on the back of the console is this little sign that says, "It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice," you know. And that was just it. You know, it's like, check your ego and, you know, just play music and be nice and be a gentleman and get along. And yeah, I got to spend many hours with Chet, and that was worth the price of admission moving to Nashville. You know, you asked me if I regretted anything, I wouldn't have given that up for anything. You know, to have gotten to be a friend of Chet's, and yeah.
So how did you meet Conway? Here, I mean, here.
Jimmy Bowen. I was working for Jimmy Bowen just as a studio musician, and Conway was one of his artists. So we did a record at Soundstage, and remember I met Conway, and he'd heard about Toto, and he says, "So, you sure you can play country, son?" And I told him, well, my first gig was with a country band, you know, in Missouri, and I didn't tell him I was playing tenor sax, but he said, well, okay, and you know, after that, you know, he said I was his favorite bass player, and that was great, because that was like affirmation moving to Nashville, and yeah, that was good. And Bowen did a lot of artists back then. I got to work with Reba and George Strait and people like that, and Bellamy's, and, you know, early on.